evening, everyone. We've got all the C's here, and I'm going to kick things off. First of all, thanks for joining our panel. We've got a large panel today, a lot of C's, but I'm going to kick things off by passing it over to Sam. Just a quick round of introductions. All right, Sam, tell us your story, how you got here, and how you got involved with the security space.
Wow. Okay, so I didn't intend to get into the security space. I'll keep it very short. I was in documentation and QA and engineering, and I wanted to go into biotech, but I wound up going instead. The brother of the person I was trying to speak to about getting into biotech was running a startup in cybersecurity in Canada, and I wound up staying there. We got acquired, and I actually found a passion in protecting consumers to start with. The rest is history through RSA and CA and McAfee and what have you to today's Zscaler. And no looking back.
Thank you. Chris, over to you.
Yes, so I was a software developer in the 90s, and I started getting interested in hacking with the internet. I was a white hat hacker. So back before 2000, if you were a white hat hacker, you weren't a security professional. You were an annoyance for technology companies because you would talk about what you were seeing, and it was almost always bad. So I started off basically as a hobby. And then I decided maybe I should go pro. And you know, white hat hackers you kind of had to hide that. You had to kind of hide that you had a hacker name and that you did vulnerability research, because then people didn't want to hire you. You were untrusted. And it took a few years, I would say, till the early 2000s before people from that background became trusted, because we had the adversarial mindset, right? And that was scary at the time. But now, you need people on your team that have the adversarial mindset. That's a standard part of any security team. And so I feel like we've infiltrated, the white hat hackers have infiltrated professional security. And I'm here to do it. Thank
you, Chris. And for those who don't know, Chris is actually pretty famous. I looked him up on the internet, and he testified in front of Senate not too long ago.
That definitely helped legitimize what we were doing, for sure.
Thank you, Chris. Ayoub, over to you. Quick introduction, how you stumbled across security.
Yeah, I started off like when I was very young, but like more recently, 10 years ago, I was highly active on what's known as bug bounty, and through that, I have submitted hundreds of vulnerabilities to many of the Fortune 500 companies. Majority was submitted actually to Facebook, Meta right now. I was highly active on that. So yeah, I leveraged that to run also a consultancy firm, which I was offering security services through that later. And yeah, I mean, after that, I joined Noon, and I'm currently there for 6 years already.
Very cool. And for those who don't know, tell us a little bit more about Noon as a company. Yeah.
I think Noon is widely known in the region. It's the biggest technology e-commerce company. It's not e-commerce only, it's doing a bunch of other services. But yeah, it's mostly into technology and commerce services.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trevor.
Yeah, so basically I was working as an engineer in development. And then when the PC was invented, I sort of moved across there and started looking at how it could be connected and networked. So I worked in networking for a while. And then when the first firewalls came along, that looked as though it was going to be the place to be. So I sort of shifted across into cybersecurity, and that was probably early to mid 1990s. And then it grew from there. And so, so I spent my time working for various organizations like Nortel, Juniper, Palo Alto Networks, all sort of focused on helping organizations, especially within critical infrastructure. So.
And Trevor, can you share a little bit about Illumio? What does your company do?
So Illumio is very focused on, I guess we focus on cyber resilience, and that's basically by containing a ransomware attack to stop it spreading and reaching the critical parts of the organization. So it's sort of micro-segmentation based, but there's a lot more around it, and it will take a while to describe it. But it is, as I said, really focused on preventing an attack reaching your most critical assets.
Very cool, thank you. And last but not least, Prashanth.
Well, hi. I started right out of college into computer assembling back in early 2000s. And I found out that there was a company that would pay me to test out games. So that's where I started my career in gaming with Logitech. Moved on to being in Dell. I was in Dell for about 13 years across the region from APJ to EMEA. And then moved from infrastructure to cybersecurity and have been in cybersecurity for the last 5 years.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, for the first question, I'm going to pass it on. Chris, you're going to anchor us. So going on fun facts, Chris has over 4 patents. He's authored a book. He's claimed he can take the internet down in 30 minutes. At least that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But Chris, first question. There are founders, in the audience here. What would some of your advice be as you've built Veracode, right? What would your advice be in terms of building and scaling a cybersecurity company?
Yeah, so some advice for founders, I think, is to look at the technology landscape, look at the trends, and see where there's a gap, right, where there's no solution. The thing is, in this day and age, technology is changing so fast. There's always new technology coming to market. And I can tell you one thing is the people building the technology, especially the first generation of it, they're not thinking of security at all. So they're building this stuff without thinking about security, and they start selling it. And people start buying it, and then people start attacking it, right? So what you need to do is you need to have that sort of mindset of, hey, there's something new out there that there's no good solution for. I should, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to attack it, start thinking, how would I secure that new technology? And start thinking about that emerging trend. And there's all kinds of trends going on. We've had IoT, we've had cloud. Those are still ongoing. Like there's still new ideas for IoT. There's still new ideas happening in the cloud, even though we're sort of a good 5 to 10 years into those trends. Of course, AI is a new trend. Like I've seen a lot of companies now looking at how to secure AI solutions. So I would look at the trends in technology, and I would say I start working on a solution for that. And it can be hard, it can be automated or it can be manual, right? Sometimes not everything can be automated. Sometimes you need people. Personally, I love the combination of the two. And that's what I did at Veracode. We built a SaaS company where the full solution needed technology, but it also needed people, right? Because a lot of times you need people to change the way people do things and use
Chris,
technology.
Bring us back to the early days of Veracode.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about SaaS technology is you can have the man behind the curtain, we called it, right? So you say you do one thing, and to the customer they see, oh, I'm interacting with a website, right? But you say, hey, this type of activity will get you your results in 30 minutes. And during that 30 minutes, there's some people, behind the curtain doing some manual work. And in our case, it was reducing false positives. We wanted the customer to get really good results. So there were solutions out there that were fully automated that would give bad results. And we said, let's make them wait and give them good results. And that was a differentiator. So that's why I like the SaaS model, where you can kind of play with what's done by humans and what's done by the technology. And you can kind of innovate a little bit faster and be a little bit messier with that model in the early days.
Very cool. Thank you. Trevor, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and look at it from an engineering perspective to start with, is that most new things start in very small scale, 2 or 3 people. But one of the key things to do is understand what you've built, and to understand whether you've built something completely new or whether you've built something that actually does a task that is already being performed but better. Have you built a new mousetrap sort of thing? And from there, it's really then understanding how that fits into the market. Because while everyone likes to think that inventors look at the market, all the things that are going on, The real innovation comes from the creation of something that is going to radically change that. So understanding where that goes. And then the other thing that I'd say is, absolutely read Crossing the Chasm as a book. If there's one thing to do, is try to be focused, try to stick to what you're doing, because as soon as you spread out and try and cover everything, it all goes badly wrong. So stay focused, have a plan, understand what the product does and where the value is.
Very cool. So stay focused and have a plan. Ayoub, you've had your fair share of dabbling into starting up companies. You're clearly, really successful at Noon now. But what's your perspective? We've got also a lot of students, right? We talked about that earlier, walking the halls. And what's your advice to them as they start thinking and ideating about the next cyber company? What would you say to them?
Sorry, could you clarify the question again?
What would you say to a student that you see, right, in terms of how to go about thinking about their next company?
Starting the next company, I'm a huge believer in, I think as a CISO, when I run my function, the best way for me to find, for example, the next opportunities in the cyberspace is I try to embody or I try to go through the same challenges like, for example, software engineers are going through. And the way we do that is we have, for example, security engineers joining those. We have our security engineers joining software functions. And so we have someone jointly operating as a part of cybersecurity team and software teams. And we tend to see a lot of challenges, and we build empathy with developers, and we see kind of what is the day-to-day challenges they are going through. And we use that as a way to know like what is the best next opportunities we can build solutions for these kind of challenges. I would say this is one of the best ways that worked a lot for us because we are a company that tend to build solutions internally. We don't usually buy a lot of vendor solutions. So if I want to build the next company, I will just probably join a company, work as a security engineer, see what is the challenges that are still unsolved in this space, and try to solve them, basically.
Very cool. Okay, I'm just switching gears, and I'm going to stick with you. Topic is collaboration, right? Noon is a large company. You've got multiple business units, but it's also different departments. Talk to us a little bit about how you communicate and collaborate across the different functions. Maybe start with which functions do you interact with the most, or you and your team, and then kind of how do you guys hold yourselves accountable?
Yeah, I think the best way you can extend your impact and reach as a cybersecurity function is through effective collaboration. And the way you can do that is first, you want to look for what I call natural allies. And they are there in every organization. For example, like the best natural allies for cybersecurity function, they are usually the risk team, the legal team, the IT team, technology. And I would just look for opportunities how we can foster communication and collaboration with these teams. For example, if we pick technology as a department, one of the effective ways that worked out for us best is, as I mentioned, one of them is we hire security engineers and we have them operating inside technology. That builds empathy in both directions. For us as a security team, we get to know what is the challenges these software engineers are going through. So that builds empathy, and that's very helpful. Another way is we run, for example, capture the flag competitions between software engineers. They get to enjoy it a lot to the extent that some of them wanted to join us. But like also we use this as an opportunity to instill security knowledge. I think generally there are like multiple ways you can foster collaboration with multiple teams. But like you gotta look out for the best allies and use that as a leverage, because you as a security team, you are always vastly outnumbered by the rest of the organization. You cannot scale your security engineers as much as technology, for example, or like other functions. The best way you can scale that is through collaboration. So you need to seek ways and opportunities for collaboration and leverage with other departments.
Very cool, thank you. Sam, do you agree with that? I know Zscaler, having been a customer, has enjoyed a tremendous growth in the past couple of years. Any thoughts, reactions on how to think about collaboration, communicating with different stakeholders across the organization?
Yeah,
as the company scales? Go ahead, Sam.
absolutely. So I agree, but I would add a different dimension. I think it's based on trust, and I think that is earned by a lot of listening and humility. And to be very specific, I think you've got to demonstrate that you care about what other people's goals are, because we're the office of no, or the department of no, right? And people expect us to turn up and beat the table about risk, and they expect us to have a fairly selfish agenda. We don't turn up generally and demonstrate that our primary reason for being there is the business, right? And so I think this means we have to do our homework ahead of time. So before we have an agenda, it means that we have to work on our lateral relationships. We have to have informal gatherings where we actually break bread with people, where we share MBOs, right? They take ours, we take theirs. And you also have to understand, where does authority come from in an organization? So I'm relatively new to Zscaler. I joined 9 months ago. For those who saw my presentation yesterday, I hope to be here in at least another 9. But that means, how are decisions made in an organization? Does it come from hierarchy? Does it come from consensus? Does it come from the customer? I mean, by the way, contact with the customer in any role and understanding the pains and the outcomes required is a superpower. And what I mean by that is, if you focus on those results, then you can come back and speak with authority on most subjects. But understanding how decisions are made is a cultural imperative. And I don't mean ethnicity or geography or anything like that. I mean, the corporate culture is about how decisions are made and how to get things done.
That's super interesting, Sam, because I guess you're adding a slightly different dimension to my question. You're saying the external customer is equally as important in terms of the communication and collaboration. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, the external customer, by the way, is the reason we're all there, right? I mean, ultimately, we either succeed or fail on the basis of whether they buy into us, literally buy our products, and then continue to support and work with us, right? And so if we aren't ultimately responsible to that in every department, we're going to fail. But I think that most important, like, CISOs fail when they take the formula as cast in their first job and move to a new job and just try to repeat it, as opposed to understanding what's the new business, what do these customers want, even if it's in the same industry, even if you go to a competitor, right? You have to understand the nuances. Gary called it earlier, the total experience. You may know the customer experience, but do you know the employee experience? How do you get budget? How do you move resources? What mobilizes to make a particular project in IT happen, let alone in security? And so, like I said, it requires humility and listening, but getting that firsthand experience. So my advice to CISOs when you turn up is spend a lot of time listening and a lot of time socializing, because you won't succeed without those peers, and you won't succeed if you don't know where authority comes from, how decisions are made, and if you don't know the ultimate result and outcomes the company has to achieve. That's ultimately what all those OKRs and MBOs are motivated by.
No, great insights, Prasad. I want to go to you, but before I do that, Sam, so final question. If you think about, again, Zscaler is fairly new, right? 9 months. What did you have to change, right, in terms of your mindset, in terms of how you operate it, interacting with the Zscaler customer?
So unless there's some big surprise, I didn't really. And the reason is because I came in expecting to be in a constant state of change. So I'm lucky that I knew our CEO, Jay, who's really great and very present with the customers himself. That's one of the reasons I joined. Everybody knows Jay, I mean, pretty much. And I was determined to use that. And so I came in understanding I have a service mentality, and some of this was reflected earlier in Stephen's presentation. I come in with a service mentality, find a way to say yes to things, and why not do it now, generally. And that kind of worked with the Zscaler culture, and I knew that coming in. And it goes back to the startup mentality you started this with. Those attitudes are generally good in startups too, and that growth mindset and having a founder still present meant I think I was ready to slide into the role. There have been surprises, right, and how things are done or which groups do what. That's always there, but I expected to find differences there. Right? Culture shock happens when you expect things to be the same and you find they're different. And I expected them to be different, and that's what I found.
Very cool. Thank you, Prasad. I know right before the panel, you shared that you have significant interactions with customer, primarily those in the federal space as well. Can you share a little bit about your approach to communication and collaboration?
The idea is when we're in the space of cybersecurity, it's important to understand the customer's need rather than trying to stick with the norm, right? In the cybersecurity space today that we're seeing, it's a constantly evolving dynamic environment. You cannot find a one-size-fits-all solution. You cannot say this is the right way to do it, this is the best way to do it. The only thing we can tell them is this is the most optimum way where you stand now to achieve it. And one of the things I try to tell our customers is, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to fix and build up something that will prevent an attack from happening. It's going to happen, right? What we can do and what we should strive to do is to make sure that we detect the attack as soon as possible and stop propagation before he does any serious damage, right? That's what we try to educate our customers. When we talk to government organizations, federal entities, the requirement is quite different than a standard regular enterprise customer because the use cases and the challenges that they want trying to address are different. The baseline remains the same, but the way they want to approach it is different. The use cases are quite more extensive. The reach is far more extensive. The scalability, flexibility required is more extensive. So what we try to do is we try to tell them how to adopt a technology stack rather than going with a point solution, right? We try to first understand what are the challenges that you want to solve? How can you get there? Do you have the people to help you get there? Do you have the processes defined to get there? The technology is a dime a dozen, right? So that's the kind of approach we try to take. Try to recommend the best practices to develop, achieve what they want to go from where they are today to where they need to be tomorrow.
Great insights, Prasad. I want to take us back to a comment Chris made very early on. I mean, you think about, kind of what we need to protect today. I mean, there's so many things out there, right? You talk about IoT, you talk about new cloud technologies, and you talk about AI. How do you think about, or how do you at least advise your customers to think about securing everything, right? I mean, back in the day, it was just that PC, all right, or that server. Now it's all over the place. Help us think through that, in terms of how do you create a program, or what's an approach that can help secure everything? Prasad, yep. I'm sticking with you. Yep.
All right. So what we tell customers is visibility is the key. You need to see what's going on. You only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know, right? So with organizations that have built and invested in cybersecurity over a period of time, what we normally see is they're very siloed. They've got a department that's responsible for A. Then they have another department that's responsible for B. There's somebody responsible for red team. There's somebody responsible for vulnerability management. There's somebody responsible for the SOC. There's no communication between them at the layer of technology or at the layer of the people. And that's the biggest problem because attackers are far more sophisticated today. I mean, now we had somebody speaking a little before the panel. They're talking about how attacks have changed, dynamics of attacks have changed. We've seen attackers come in very silently, stay in the environment for years together before they do anything, right? Today, the organizations have picked up technologies that are very proprietary in nature, very point solution in nature, that does not give them the agility and the flexibility to move around. Behavior analytics is something that we've been hearing so often, but people have data for 30 days, 90 days. What analytics of behavior will you get in the past 90 days? It's important to go historical, right? Or AI. How many people have the capability to actually test an AI model? We have a data scientist, we have a data engineer, they build a fantastic model. Okay, what's the accuracy? Oh, we have a 97% accuracy. Brilliant. Okay, but how good is the model? Accuracy doesn't define how good the model is, right? There are so many dynamics within cybersecurity today that conventional technologies or conventional architectures do not meet. And that's what we as a company try to take to market. We try to tell the customers there's a different way things have to be done, right? Doesn't mean you need to reinvest. Just need to change the way you look at it.
Very good insights. Sam, you gave me a look.
Yeah, well, until Prasanth brought up the AI, and now I feel like I'm going to leave that alone unless you want to go there, because we could talk on that one for a long time. But two things to say about your original question, how do you secure everything? And the first part is you don't, right? I mean, what I mean by that is if you try to secure everything, you're doing it wrong.
So don't secure everything.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, Sam.
I was recently at UNC Charlotte, and there was a panel on mergers, and everyone was talking about what's your control framework, and how do two companies, and which control framework you use. And look, I'm sorry, that doesn't matter. Everyone has an AV, and everyone has a firewall, and everyone has IDS, and you're going to choose which one's better. What matters is the risk registries. What matters is the discussion of what things are you concerned about in both companies coming together or more. In one instance, I had more than two coming together on the same day. And then what's it going to look like afterwards? That is a risk discussion rather than a control discussion. And so what you should be doing is saying, what scenarios do we have to cover and which ones are the long tail that matter less? And the second point is that security isn't a snapshot. Like if you saw a race, let's say race cars, and you take a picture of it at any point in time and say, which car wins the race, you don't know. And you don't know because you don't have enough information. You don't have the first and second derivative of information about the speed of the cars going around the track, unless, of course, it's very time-lapsed. But we'll put that to the side, right? And so what do I mean by that? The control set that you deploy and the tools as we go down, as we do as security people, what's the whiz-bang thing for securing AI or whatever, IoT, et cetera, chipsets, whatever, cloud. We're busy doing the game we've played for years where we turn up at Black Hat and say, I have a new thing that secures things, and we cheer, and one person says, I found a way to break it, and we get depressed. What we're not doing is saying, how healthy are we? To your point earlier, it's a resilience measure, right? How well do we bounce back? How fast do we find things? And by the way, if we can take exposures and reduce the time to approach zero, and if we can make our patch time approach zero, and we can make our time to recovery approach zero, we're going to frustrate the heck out of these attackers. And so I don't think our goal is to protect everything. It's protect what matters and get really healthy with that first and second derivative of cybersecurity, not the snapshot.
I really love the analogy of the sports car. I think of Formula One, and it's absolutely true. Trevor, you're nodding. Please.
Yeah, I know. Just a sort of reinforcement of what Sam said was that we have to stop thinking about cybersecurity as the end game. Cybersecurity is there to enable our business to be more resilient. And so it isn't just a case of focusing on cybersecurity, it is the what happens next. And when you read a lot of the reports on recent attacks, and there was one about came out yesterday on the Danish critical infrastructure, so often there isn't a plan. Unplugging an oil network isn't a plan isn't a way to solve an attack. Diverting patients to a different hospital isn't a way to solve an attack. So you have to sort of start thinking about security will get us so far, but we have to plan for what happens next and how we survive and recover that. And that's reflected in a lot of regulations that are coming out from national regulators around the globe saying, don't be stupid, stop trying to stop everything and work out what is your highest risk and address that risk first.
So Josh Corman did CIS's healthcare strategy for cyber, and he found that there's a 4-minute thing around healthcare. And if you have to divert people more than 4 minutes to get to a hospital, you won't notice death go up in the short term, but people with diabetes, strokes, respiratory problems, and heart attacks, you'll see spikes of death in the 90 to 270 day range. But how many cyber people know that?
No.
Right? And so the purpose of this panel is about what we're doing in the rest of the business. We have to get into the rest of the business so that we can say, well, we're not going to divert the ambulances.
Great insights, guys. I'm going to switch gears. Chris, I'm going to have you kick us off. Budgets, right? In an ideal world, we have unlimited budgets, and we can protect everything, or not, as Sam would say. Help us think through how to navigate that, right? Again, we have constraints in terms of budgets and resources, right? Some of us have a lot of budgets, but many of us don't. Help us think through how we build a security program, given the constraints we have on budgets.
Yeah, so just simply asking for more money for something sometimes actually works when you have a good reasoning behind it. And so you have to be able to explain to the rest of the business why you need to get funding for a particular thing. Like I said, things are constantly changing, right? You're moving to the cloud. now I need a budget to cover cloud, I need a solution to cover cloud infrastructure. And you can't always just move from one product or service to another product or service. So you have to do your homework and really understand how you can communicate the value of that. One of them is the risk register, like Sam was mentioning. That's something that executives understand when you're communicating about why your budget needs to change. But I think a lot of the things you can do with your budget is vendor consolidation. I think is typically a good thing. We have found, especially over the last 5 years, that we've been able to move from 3 vendors to 1 or 2 vendors to 1 in a particular space because there is a lot of acquisitions happening. There are a lot of solutions that are expanding, and you go with a leader. I won't mention any names that are on the stage here, but there are companies that are doing well at what they do, and they're expanding what they do, and by consolidating with those kind of vendors, you definitely can save money on your budget and free up money to do other things.
You manage a really large budget across Noon, right, and all the different entities. Can you share a little bit on the same topic, right? I mean, how do you know how and when to prioritize?
I mean, our company generally, I think we have over 10,000 employees, so it's quite large. And
sorry, say 10,000 employees?
I don't know the
over
number.
10,000
like
employees.
Way
okay.
over that. So like whatever the budget you have, you probably is going to be limited in ways, you know? Whatever the budget, it's like 10,000 employees, so many devices, so many assets in the cloud. It's massive. Even our assets in the cloud is like hundreds of thousands of assets. So if I have a limited budget, first thing I would do, I would just try to hire junior talent and train them. That's the first approach. And actually, we tried it in some functions, and it's working well. It takes time to take off. So probably first year, you wouldn't have much kind of returns. You wouldn't see value. Like in the subsequent years, you know, like those people actually start giving back. So I would focus on hiring junior talent and train them properly, which means I also need to set up a proper training program, onboarding program for them. That's on the talent side. Then I would focus on automation, automate a lot. So the engineers you have, you need to leverage them to automate a lot, do a lot of automation. Probably run like bug money programs because that's an easier way to get findings from the community. I would just like focus on low budget approach that have high returns. And yeah, that's what I think about it.
Great. Sam, what do you think?
So I had a CFO who was a former banker. And you'd think that's bad, but it wasn't. Russ Stein, he was amazing, but I made him a really good friend. And the same thing with legal counsel, because they manage risk as well, right?
Okay.
So these are outside the security department. And the reason I mention it is because you've got to draw a line on that risk registry below which you're willing to compromise, right? I had a CISO friend of mine, I won't name, said that there's ridiculous risk line, and then there's willing to make some trade-offs, and then I'm willing to give up. And that may sound rough, but they've got to see you in the rest of the business make trade-offs. So Russ, I asked him once, what does each department want? And he was like, well, marketing wants more program dollars, and sales wants to cover a new region, and engineering wants a new developer. And I said, what do I want? And he said, security wants toys. I'm not joking. What they hear from us is, I need risk, I need toys. And they don't believe it's as important, and they can't make a trade-off for the other asks from the business. So until they see us make compromises and say, you know what, covering that new region is more important than this moderate level risk, and I can find ways to innovate, you're in trouble. And so one of the things I did was I said, let me stack rank by commoditization of controls. In other words, they differentiate on price, and they're not really differentiated at helping me with risk. And you help me reduce the spend on some vendors, I'll give some back, and you're gonna lend me resources, because I think I'm a good negotiator, but I'm not compared to his people. I mean, really, he's got pros. That's what they do all day long. Help me win more money back for the business, then help me go buy some new tools and for the really important stuff. So this is a business alliance rather than a give me more money, fulus. I don't need more money. What I need is a business alliance with non-cyber people.
I love it. So to buy our toys, be best friends with the CFO.
Yeah. And by the way, I knew I'd succeeded after 5 years working with him. When he asked me as I left the company, he said, "Do you think I get my CISSP?" I'm like, woof. Yeah, but he could. He's smart enough. Yeah.
Prasad, close us off on this question. I've got a final one.
The risk quantification has been a topic of C-suits when we talk to customers, right? How do I put a dollar value to my risk? That helps sometimes. What I wanted to say is, when we talk to customers who have a challenge of saying, I want to go and improve my cybersecurity maturity, but I don't have a lot of budget that my manager is allotting for me, we try to tell them to change the approach of cybersecurity from looking at it as a cost center to try to think of it as a revenue center, right? And to do that, it's just one change of demographic that you have to do on how you approach cybersecurity, is instead of buying tools to achieve cybersecurity, try to derive cybersecurity from data collection. If you're collecting data across your organization and you want to derive cybersecurity out of that, the same data collection investment can do business intelligence, can provide back to business for analytics, and that same investment can get you the results for cybersecurity. And now you can start doing, and we've done successful projects of that in some of the countries here in GCC, where we've had them, even we worked out a chargeback plan for the cybersecurity to charge back to business, saying, I'm going to consolidate the data, I'm going to save you on your BCRP costs because I've got one repository to back up and recover. I'm going to have easier control on my security because I've got one massive storage to control. But now, I'm going to let you consume that data for analytics that you want to run business intelligence on, but I'm going to charge you for that consumption, right? So it depends on what the customer would like to see and how they would like to improve their maturity as an organization, both at a cybersecurity level and at an organizational level. And if you try to cross them over, I think it's a very good conversation to have.
Great advice, Prasad. Trevor, Nortel, Gigamon, Juniper, Palo Alto Networks. You've been around for a really long time in the industry. What's broken in security today, and what needs to change?
I think it comes back a bit to what was being said there. It's, you know, the thing that you see over the years is you talk to an organization, they go, have you got budget? And they go, yeah, we've got this much budget. Okay, I can buy 20 of whatever your product is, and that's great. And you go back and see them 6 months later, and you go, what's the product doing? Are you doing all the things it can do to protect you? And they say, well, we've turned on firewalling. And a lot of the problem is that these budgets are created for the product, but they're not necessarily created for the people and the analysts and the things you need to drive them. So all of the money you're spending on technology can be wasted. And what we've seen over, again, the last 25, 30 years is this cycle of here's a threat, here's the product, here's the threat, here's the product, here's the threat, here's the product. And so organizations have racks and racks, 50, 200 security products. And so we have to break that cycle. And to a certain extent, it's being forced on us by, again, the regulators and the national cyber strategies where they're saying, you need to do zero trust, you need to implement, NIST CSF, you need to do these whatever your national thing is. And by adopting a strategy as opposed to a reaction, then I think we can slowly change ourselves away from the never having enough money, never having enough resource, to a model where we can actually build that secure, resilient environment.
Chris, what do you think? It's been 25 years since you testified to Senate. It's been 25 years since you said you could, break the internet in 30 minutes. What's broken? It seems like we're still trying to solve cybersecurity. What's broken? What needs to change?
Yeah, I think it's taken a long time for some of the messages I was talking about in the 90s, which is ask more from your suppliers, ask more from your vendors. Don't keep letting them deliver you stuff that makes you vulnerable constantly. And I think that message is starting to finally resonate. I know the US government, President Biden came out with an executive order 2 years ago basically saying, we're going to hold our vendors accountable They're going to do things like tell us what open source packages they're using. They're going to attest that they actually did security when they built the product or service that is potentially putting me at risk. So I think the supply chain is a big part of the problem, and there's a big awareness now that we have to hold the vendors accountable, and we need to manage the risk that's coming into our organization with the technology and services that other people are providing us. And I think the US federal government gets that now. It's a big problem. It's not going to be solved overnight, but actually saying we're going to try to tackle it, that really hasn't happened before a few years ago. And I know a lot of businesses are ramping up their own vendor management when they look at suppliers through the procurement process and are scrutinizing the technology that's coming into businesses much more. So that's one thing I'm hopeful for, that is a big sort of strategic change with the way we manage risk.
So do you think the public and private sector needs to partner more for this to be, you know?
I think the public and private sector are working together much better. I think, you know, I know in the US with CISA, they've made big strides to engage with the private sector, learn from the private sector, but also hold the private sector accountable.
Great insights, Chris. Final question before we wrap up, 10 seconds. We're heading into 2024 in 10 seconds. Well, what's your prediction, right, for security? We start all the way with Prasad. Prasad, 10 seconds.
I think the focus has to be around centralization and collaboration across tools, technologies, and people. You have to achieve a bridge between people, process, and technology to achieve complete cybersecurity vision.
Great.
And like Sam said, you can't protect everything, but focus on what's more important.
Okay, centralization. Trevor, 2024.
People taking a much more risk-based approach to security, and you know, again, the influence of national legislation and regulators is going to grow and grow.
More regulation in 2024. Ayoub.
I think AI and ML technologies would emerge and start like learning attack traffics and auto-defend that. I think that's probably like what I think will be the next in 2024.
Great. Chris, prediction.
I'm going to say also with AI, I think AI is going to help defenders more than attackers, and I think it's because we're resource constrained on the defender side, and I think AI can help there more.
Leverage AI to protect us. And Sam, take us home.
I want to build on that. I think the bad guys, the attackers, still innovate at a faster rate than defenders. I think one of the tools that's going to help to accelerate that is AI. I'd like to see a SecOps revolution start, just like the DevOps one. I don't think it'll happen in 2024, but I think the germs of it could start. Because if we don't reverse that, it's just going to keep on this track, and that's not acceptable.
Wow. Thank you. You heard it first. Predictions for 2024 in security. Thank you, gentlemen.